Hello all, my name is Ira Eidle. I am a senior theater and performance studies student at Kennesaw State University, and today I'm here to present my findings about a work of theater created by autistic people and what it says about how autism is viewed in our society at large. When autistic people become informed about the harm the at-large medical model of disability and the misunderstandings it causes, they can, together through theatrical arts, mitigate said understandings. What I'm specifically looking at is how Autistic's Helping Hands 2019 production dismantles the prevailing medical model of disability as it pertains to autism. So, first off, what is autism? The definition of autism varies depending on who you talk to. The DSM-V's diagnostic criteria for autism requires someone to have deficits in social emotional reciprocity, nonverbal communicative behaviors used for social interactions, and in developing, maintaining, and understanding relationships. To me, this is very patronizing because it pathologizes autistic people's natural way of being and it treats who we are as a deficit. What I prefer is the definition from the Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, ASAN, and ASAN has been around for 14 years and is revered by the autistic community as the leading voice of the neurodiversity movement. It describes things autistic. Wait, no. So, autism is a neurological variation and is classified as a developmental disability. Autism is a developmental disability that affects how we experience the world around us. Autistic people are an important part of the world. Autism is a normal part of life and makes us who we are. Autism has always existed. Autistic people are born autistic and we will be autistic our whole lives. Autism can be diagnosed by a doctor, but you can be autistic even if you don't have a formal diagnosis. Anyone can be autistic regardless of race, gender, or age. Autistic people are in every community and we always have been. Some autistic people can speak, and some autistic people need to communicate in other ways. There is no right or wrong way to be autistic. Every autistic person experiences autism differently, but there are some things that many of us have in common. Autistic people do a lot of things differently and may need help with their daily lives. There are lots of different ways to be autistic, but that's okay. With all that in mind, let's break down what the medical model of disability is and an alternative, the social model. The medical model of disability says that a disabled person is disabled due to their own personal impairments. It says that people with disabilities are broken, abnormal, and or damaged versions of normal human beings. Because of their impairments, caregivers and medical professionals must make decisions for the person, and people with disabilities are a charity case. Institutions such as the infamous Willowbrook State School, pictured here, are a result of the medical model. The disabled person must overcome their disability and adapt to society in order to be valid and acceptable. The puzzle piece is deeply embedded within this model, as the puzzle piece was originally designed to represent how autistic people are puzzling and incomplete versions of normal human beings. Variations in neurocognitive functioning that diverge substantially from socially constructed standards of normal, including the variations that constitute autism, are framed within this paradigm as medical pathologies, as deficits, damage, or disorders. The alternative to the medical model, the social model of disability, says that disabled people are disabled by societal barriers, can be autonomous, can make their own choices, and that society needs to adapt to accommodate the needs of people with disabilities. The disability rights movement and disability justice are central to this model, as is the term "nothing about us without us." The social model of disability, when applied to autism, is often called the neurodiversity paradigm, and it is the founding principle of the neurodiversity movement, sometimes stylized as the autism rights movement. The neurodiversity movement looks to foster greater acceptance of people with autistic behaviors, therapies that are based on coping skills rather than cures that would imitate normal or neurotypical people, and the need to recognize autism as a minority group. Organizations such as ASAM, which I mentioned earlier, and Autism Network International are central to this movement. Sadly, ANI is no longer in operation, but it did lay the groundwork for currently operational organizations such as ASAN to follow. They are founded by and for autistic people. They promote autistic and disability culture. Now that I have given you an overview of autism, disability, and neurodiversity, I am now going to shift to talking about Autistic. Autistic is a theater company founded in 2018, based in Melbourne, Australia, that was started by a mixture of autistic and otherwise neurodivergent people. Neurodivergent people meaning people with other mental disabilities like dyslexia and ADHD. Autistic uses a particular style of performance known to them as spectrum theater. They write, direct, and produce original works, consult with other creatives, collaborate with other artists, and put on relaxed productions in their show where sensory input is less intense. It's kind of like over here when special screenings are done of movies or quiet hours at the grocery store. Um, they also run workshops aimed at a broad range of people and organizations, and they write and comment on autism and neurodiversity. Their latest production is Helping Hands. Helping Hands is composed of a variety of different scenes about autism, combining sketch, comedy, satire, storytelling, mime, psychology education, and much more. I was able to get a hold of the production script to analyze it. From watching the interviews with the directors of the production, they say in their own words that Helping Hands is about autism and help. As I mentioned earlier, Autistic uses what is called spectrum theater, a term they devised for their work. The ideas associated with being an autistic person is that things don't make sense and won't be explained to you. In spectrum theater, the idea gets flipped. The autistic people in the theater know more about what's happening than the non-autistic people in the room. Helping Hands takes the idea of the proper way to help someone and how the normal idea of help is often not the right solution. The message is to say, before you act, think. Now here is a video of the opening scene, A Very Special Girl Named Charity.
The modern epidemic of Autism. Now, today
Autism, that's not being autistic.
Autism and its many challenges every day. Everyone, please welcome charities. Charities. God, everyone give charities like a big round of applause. Every day, it's just... Thank you. That recognition just means so much. Charities, what do you have? No. Thank God. Now you're a real hero, Charities. So, technically speaking, autism is the tragic condition of not being autistic, but that's just the dry scientific approach. What can you tell us about autism from a mother's perspective? Sure. Well, for me, probably the hardest thing, it's the lack of authenticity. I just don't feel like we have a real connection. Could you give an example? Just, something intimate and private from Charity's life. Absolutely. Anything for awareness. Unfortunately, this story didn't make it into my forthcoming memoir, but I do think it's a really perfect illustration of what I deal with. So just the other day, Charity was coming home from school. I asked her how she was, and she just said, fine. She just lied to you. That's so sad. If she didn't want to talk, she could have just said so. Or said nothing. I just wish she and I could have a normal conversation. Now, to understand what's going on here, let's bring in the country's foremost expert on not being autistic. They just received the prestigious $1 million research grant from Donna Speaks. Please welcome Dr. Professor! Tell us about that.
This is one of the classic deficits we see in the non-autistic person, the struggle with honesty. So with Charity, we'd be looking at a therapy that helps her develop a connection between what she feels and what she says. But ultimately that connection will never truly be real.
And so you mentioned some of the deficits of non-autism. Could you tell us more?
Sure, we tend to see an unnatural stillness in the non-autistic person, a propensity to miss completely obvious patterns in the environment, and a tendency to become distraught in the most unusual of circumstances.
Charity always wants me to look at her eyes.
Yes, conflating eye contact with attention love is a classic deficit.
What other weird and unnatural things do holistic people do? I prefer child without autism because it's important to separate the child and the condition.
It's true,
Alright, so were we entertained? So now we are going to look at an ongoing character arc in Helping Hands that almost acts as in a play within the play. The first scene of the arc is Donna and the Ball, where a non-speaking girl named Donna is put through a common treatment known as Applied Behavior Analysis, ABA, which is controversial for the trauma it has caused and its links to conversion therapy. ABA is shown to have increased incidence of PTSD among those subject to it, as shown in a 2018 study that concluded that 46% of the ABA-exposed respondents met the diagnostic criteria threshold for PTSD. Donna has a nice lady therapist. Nice lady therapist is an archetype, but that's also what the character is called in this scene. They tell us that whatever they do to us is by definition nice and good for us. They have a brightly decorated room full of toys and assure every adult they come across that their kids love therapy. In the next scene, Donna and Simone in Ball. Donna is now in her teens and is now working with an inexperienced therapist at a day program. Her behaviors with her Ball are seen as odd and not seen as communication. Donna gets frustrated by trying to communicate with Simone and throws the ball at her. The next scene to feature Donna is Donna and Simone in Abstract Sorrow, where Donna is now in her late teens and is struggling to communicate. She is so frustrating that she starts banging her head against the wall. Simone notices, gets her a pillow, blankets, and a water bottle in an attempt to calm her down. None of it works, so they have to wait until her father comes to pick her up. In the final scene, featuring Donna, Donna Speaks. Donna is finally given a communication device and is able to communicate her thoughts with the world. She never liked the ball, and her communication signs were ignored by everyone around her. People kept assuming that they knew what was best for her and stripped Donna of her autonomy, and it made her feel powerless. Her autism was seen as a list of deficits to be treated rather than a disability to be accommodated. Now that she has a robust communication device, she can be more independent and autonomous, demonstrating how much better using the social model to empower someone with a disability is, better than using the medical model to make decisions for them can be. There are several other examples of how the medical model, when applied to autism, can be damaging, such as bureaucracy pinball, where the call center tells a mother that she must prove her child is a low-functioning burden in order to receive financial assistance. The medical model relies heavily on functioning labels to denote how functional an autistic person is. High functioning means that you aren't autistic enough to know what real autism is like, and low functioning means that you are too autistic to have a voice or mind. They harm every autistic person. Judge Rotenberg-Milgrim is demonstrative of perhaps the most extreme enforcement of the medical model, highlighting a center and experiment that both use electric shocks to control people's behaviors. Party is a Battlefield is about an autistic person going to party and how the noise and general atmosphere of parties make them generally undesirable environments for autistic people. Helping Hands was generally well received, running a sold-out season at the La Mama Courthouse from August 7th to 10th of 2019. One review I found said that Helping Hands turned out to be an incredibly engaging production that was as entertaining as it was informative. According to the reviewer, it helped the audience with ease and used humor to skillfully enable an easy experience of some pretty dense content. Helping Hands sets an example for how theatrical arts can be used to expand people's worldview about autism and neurodiversity. I hope that from my presentation, this is just my works cited, I hope that from my presentation you have gained a greater understanding of autism from a civil rights perspective and now see how the art of theater can be used to effectively advocate for equal rights and liberation for autistic people.